Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we are on the website of NYE CO Auctioneers based in the US. We're going to have a very short look here at some lots in one of their auctions. There's an auction that's running April 21st to the 22nd. In fact, I believe that most of the lots for the 21st have already finished, but the things we're interested in are on the 22nd, so we're going to have a look at these things. This auction has a buyer's premium, I believe, of 23%. They've got some, if you buy through their website, they've got reduction, otherwise you pay a bit more if you're using some of the online services. As always, kind of check out their information and kind of familiarize yourself, especially if you're buying from abroad. What's interesting about this auction, why I want to take you through it, is that it seems that someone's selling their collection of violins with carved heads of different types. You sometimes see these in auctions, but you don't usually see a whole set of them. There aren't any of them here that are massively amazing, but I think it's something interesting to cover. And historically, the instruments have had kind of animal heads for a long time, and the kind of predecessors to the violin family of instruments, the viols, had carved instrument heads, and they were still some violins that had very fancy carved heads as well. I think there's some makers in Poland at some stage, kind of 17th century or early kind of 18th, doing some very ornate kind of carvings. But yeah, these are not that, but still an interesting thing to look at, and there's only a few lots, so we can go through it. So let's have a look at this first one. It is an American horsehead violin. So what I think's happened here, they say copy of a Stradivari body with a horse's head scroll. So I think someone's basically just grabbed the body of like a one of the generic kind of trade violin, done some really dodgy varnish repair and stripping on it, and added this kind of horse's head to it. But the horse itself is quite interesting. The violin is unfortunately in a pretty terrible state. That's a bit big. Yeah, the violin itself is in a pretty terrible state, unfortunately. Let's have a quick close-up on the horse's head there, so we can just see. That's not too bad. And you can see here that they've been sanding, they had its old varnish, and they've started redoing the top. All sorts of funny things kind of going on here. In the back here is kind of partially sanded, so I think it's an interesting one. But there are 15 hours left, so not too long. But that one is kind of curious. This one I think is probably the most interesting. So it says circa 1900 with a repairer's label from 1920. But I have a feeling that this the head of this may be slightly older than that. I think the body looks like it's probably another repurposed trade instrument, but the actual head I think may be a bit older. How old, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I'll just go to this one. So we can see that there seems to be some kind of a neck graft. Not that that really means anything as such, but just looking at the carving style and the wear on it, I mean, I could be completely wrong, but it looks like the head may be a bit older. Unfortunately, the body has a massive crack at the back, so that might affect its Might need a bit of repair there, otherwise it would be quite interesting. And the back of this as well, you can see that I think the scroll of this is a lot more interesting than the actual violin itself. I think this could be the most interesting one of all of them here. This is let's say, contemporary 20th century contemporary violin, handmade by Rolando Hybe, 1985. So we'll try and look at that a little bit. It's an interesting violin there. Curious head. I don't think we need to look at too many more pictures on that, but that's a curiosity, as they say. So this one is interesting. It says Saxon, possibly a horse, late 19th century, with a metal stand. Now, I'm not sure about this carving, if that, once again, if that belongs to the body, or if indeed the neck is original. I just feel like all of these violins that are being sold here have been kind of just, everything's a bit doctored. They've taken kind of old bodies and put other necks on and other scrolls on in a really odd fashion, and it's a bit curious. You can see the buttons broken there, so it's slightly strange. There's no picture of the back of that one. Yeah, it's you can't really see 100% what's going on there. That's a curious one. Another German lion head, they're saying about 1880. This isn't too bad as carving goes. It's better than some of them. It's more complicated than some of the more simpler ones. I can't quite remember if there's another example. The violin itself, like, not really anything special, unfortunately, but it's an example of a different type of lion head. There are many different types, and they kind of, like I said, the early ones are quite complicated, and they gradually get kind of simpler as time marches on. They're saying Saxon violin, 1880 here. These are interesting, actually. I very briefly, some time ago, owned a violin with almost exactly the same head as that. So there's a lot of people going around saying that these could be by like a French maker, and I think there was a French maker at some stage, kind of mid 19th century or so, that was using some kind of heads like this, but the majority of these instruments are just German trade instruments, and they're not really worth anything. So be wary if you see someone trying to charge a crazy amount of money for something like this. It's unlikely to be anything particularly special. But these are curious, like these kind of they say lion heads. Well, they look a bit more like gargoyles, but yeah, they're a bit more primitive. Let's see here, we've got another one, maybe a little bit more detailed, but it's a similar type. Once again, the violin itself, it's a bit of an odd shape, odd f-holes. It's just all very strange. Every instrument in this collection is very bizarre. We have another one. I don't think that this collector had particularly good taste, sadly. It was just collecting any old rubbish. It looked like it had a display. Yeah, this one's slightly odder. I'd wonder where this might have come from, this instrument. They're saying 20th century, it certainly looks a bit newer. I wonder if this is one that's potentially come from China or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it's not too impressive. This one is just bizarre. American violin with gooseneck scroll. It's absolutely bonkers with the metal tuners. Yeah, this is just absolute bizarreness. All the instruments in this collection are just very odd. Let's see if we can get a look at this in a bit more detail. Yeah, it's just very odd, very primitive, but not even in an endearing way, unfortunately. Yeah, I think this is very strange. We've got a German violin, stamped John Kruszynski, Remscheid, German. Carved head, possibly Mozart. So, you do get a lot of these kind of carved heads on old instruments, and on violins it depends. Some people really like them, other people don't. Some people kind of just find them a bit horrible. I think that probably lions and things like that are a bit, and dragons or whatever, or gargoyles are a bit more, this is a horrible violin again, are a bit more favourable than like an actual person's head, but there are some pretty interesting ones about. I think it might affect the value. I think if you have a Baroque instrument, then I think it'd be probably a bit more favourable to have a kind of lion head or something like that, but maybe someone in a modern orchestra perhaps wouldn't be so keen. I mean, I'm sure some people do play them, but yeah. Here's an example of like one of the kind of more modern, well, still modern, but it's still kind of late 19th century, but one of the simplified lion heads. This is actually the perfect example. So what this selection does really show is like the kind of a few different types of lion heads. There's not one of the really fine lion heads, really early ones in this collection, unsurprisingly, but those are very stunning, like really well carved, and I think they go for quite a lot of money. So, but yep. So here's an eagle-headed violin. Yeah, it's all a bit crude, really. But once again, I just assume that these are probably made somewhere in China or similar, really, but probably not so recently. Maybe like 20 or 30 years ago, perhaps. And there's another one here with these weird body shapes and just kind of odd carvings, not particularly pleasant. Then there's a couple of contemporary ones, they're saying possibly Chinese. I think it's probably more than likely, to be honest. I think the other two bird ones were as well. It's quite possibly they might be depicting kind of Chinese philosophers or something, potentially, or it could be something completely unrelated, but you can see that these are fairly new violins. And there's another bearded man. It's a bit slow. Yeah, so not the greatest carvings. Instruments are in good condition, but they don't seem particularly well made, unfortunately. And there's a close up of the head. You can see that these aren't really the greatest of instruments. So, but anyway, yeah, I just wanted to share this kind of curious auction of kind of low grade carved headed violins, and I think really the best one, I mean, I quite like the horse's head actually, but the actual violin it's attached to is horrific. But this actual head is just kind of curious. I think this is the most interesting, and I think it might actually have the most age. I think they're probably right that the violin is itself is kind of circa 1900, but I wouldn't be surprised if this head was a bit earlier. So that in itself is interesting. So yeah, so that's it. If you want to check this out, I'll put the link in the description. NYE and Co auctions with a few kind of random carved head violins. So yeah, I'll keep an eye out for them because I do have an interest in them. I have one myself. It's a very simple kind of bird violin. I think it's probably like a fantasy German violin from the 19th century, not super old, but just one to kind of be entertaining to people. So yeah, well, once again, thanks for watching, and catch you next time. Ciao for now. Many thanks for tuning in to the Musical Instrument Investigator. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please like, subscribe and turn on notifications, and watch out for the next video coming soon.